Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry. Today's video is going to be all about the event revival for A Wish to the Winds. This facility event originally ran last November and it's back for a limited time from now until the end of June 30th. A Wish to the Winds may very well be the first facility event for many of you, particularly if you started with the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes crossover, since after that we've mainly gotten raid events and new void battles. Facility events differ from raid events in that they are primarily focused on single player content. The hardest quests in these are single player only, they're known as challenge battles, and there's an expert and master difficulty of these to take on. In the event, you're going to be leveling up an event facility that you get for free, and a lot of the name of the game with events like this is slowly leveling up your event facility to its maximum level of 30. I'm going to talk more about that when we go through each of the quests and kind of break them down, but you can see here that during this event, this is going to give you a lot of bonus damage against enemies who are specifically part of this special event. That effect is not persistent over time, it's not going to matter outside the context of this event, but the actual buffs of this shrine are permanent, so you really want to pick these up during a facility event, get them to their max level, and it's going to make the rest of your content in the future for your win team much easier. So that is one of the biggest things to point out. Make sure you are leveling up your facility with your smithworms. Now as for how to do that, you start off a facility event similar to other events. You play through some story chapters, a lot of basic quests, and eventually you'll unlock this boss battle and then the challenge battle. The boss battle has 3 difficulties: beginner, standard, and expert, and sometimes when you clear expert, you can randomly spawn an extra or EX boss battle. That's going to give you more rewards, it doesn't cost stamina or wings to complete, so you can easily complete it when paired up with other random players who have it unlocked. And the main reason you're going to want to do these is 1, there are some endeavors to get through these, extra boss battles and regular boss battles, but 2, if you're new to this event and you haven't already maxed out your facility, boss battles like Fiend Alert Expert here are the primary means through which you get these bronze level crafting materials. These materials are what's used to level up your facilities. So I guess I shouldn't say they're crafting materials, but they are level up fodder essentially for your facilities. In this case it's Wind Whistle Grass, so you're going to want to make sure you're doing this boss battle enough that you're able to level up your facility with each subsequent level as it hits those thresholds and as it's approaching the time to level it up. So that's the first part of this, is do the boss battle if your team is underpowered. It's because the challenge battle is designed in anticipation that you will eventually have 150% bonus damage on your entire team. So that's kind of the basic of it. You want to do the boss battle. Eventually you'll be able to do these challenge battles on Expert and Master, and these challenge battles are the primary way you're going to get Divine Gale rewards. Every battle in a facility event is going to give you a certain amount of points, which are basically Divine Gales in this case, and you get more of those points depending on certain conditions when you clear the quests, like taking damage a small amount of times, not getting afflicted, not having anyone on your team die, transforming into a dragon. So those are all things that can modify and give you bonus points, but essentially this is just a running tally, and you want to get up to 1,000,000 in the event duration, and the way that you're going to do this is mainly through the challenge battle. This is where you get the bulk of your points. It's also where you're going to get the bulk of materials that you can use in this event-specific treasure trade. So there are these silver level materials, friendship bracelets, and there are gold level materials, wind chimes. You can trade these down if you're missing things from the treasure trade later on. You can also trade in your extra Wind Whistle Grass once your facility reaches its max level to actually get rewards instead. As far as prioritization of these rewards, one of the first things that you want to look at is clearing out these worm prints, Luis's hobbies, because they have passive effects that you can equip to each member of your team to increase your Wind Whistle Grass intake and your Divine Gales intake. And this event kind of snowballs to where you're going to start off, you're going to have to unlock these and slowly get them for your team, but the more of them you have on your team, the more of those points or Divine Gales you're going to earn per quest, and toward the end of the event, you can make up a lot of ground toward that 1 million threshold. So definitely get these first. After that, you should get the Champion's Testament. These are still very precious and very scarce. Damascus crystals, steel bricks, and any of these items that have one of or a small amount of, like Knight's Testaments, Twinkling Sands, even these wish mills if you want to decorate your Halidom, are all worth getting. Afterward, you can start to pick up the insignias, you can start to pick up tablets if you need those, but in my opinion, I would prioritize these consecrated waters. Even though there's 100 of them there, these accrue very slowly, normally, when there's not events running, and you get a ton of them from facility events, so I would definitely go for these, and for the blessed waters, go for the succulent dragon fruit. That's also pretty precious, and the ripe dragon fruit. These orbs and scales, even the mana and rupees, it is a good amount of mana and rupees, but those are just easier to come by now. So in my opinion, the fruit and the waters are really what you want to go for. But basically, yeah, that is the nature of the prizes when it comes to facility events. I'll show you my team so you get a sense of what I mean. This is a team that is probably fine to clear the challenge battle. I'll show off some gameplay with this in a moment, and I've cleared the master difficulty with a couple solo clears that I'll also show and give some tips on that battle in just a moment. But in general, what I want to say is, you can see with my print setup, even though this Luisa's Hobbies print is a healing worm print, and it's kind of irrelevant on Musashi and Pia and Ranzal, I'm still using it there just to increase my point intake. And a team like this, with very budget dragons, like a 4-star strength dragon on your leader, and some welfare dragons like Midgard Stormer, and the free dragons we got like Yulong and Sylvia, should be sufficient to clear this event once you level up your facility to that maximum level. Alongside that, the other thing you can do to increase the power of your team during the event is basically start to level up your wind altars. Have a smith worm on each wind altar and make sure those are increasing toward level 30 while the event is active. There's also this special double drop from Windmaw Ruins, so you can get a lot of those wind orb materials you need to make sure you're able to level up those facilities. Now finally, with respect to the Master Challenge battle that I'll show off now, there are some one-of endeavors here. The first time you clear it, you do get 500 Wormite and a special epithet. So unlike the Nightmare Grand Bounties, the challenge battle, you only really need to clear it once in the duration of the event. So it doesn't have to be right now, on Master at least. Expert, you're going to want to keep doing to get points, but Master, you can just clear it once in the duration of the event. Once your team feels like it's strong enough to actually take it on, maybe once you've gotten your facility to level 25 or more, you could feel safe to challenge that, and you might be able to do it even earlier depending on how strong your win team is. So that's kind of the overview of the event. Now I'll switch over to some gameplay of the Master Challenge battle itself so I can talk tips for that. So basically I took on this Master Challenge battle and wanted to get my first clear with an Eleonora solo, so I'm showing that off now. Eleonora and bow characters in general are not very good for these types of wave-based quests because it's very hard for them to target and dispatch multiple enemies at once. Ideally, you want to be using an axe character for this, and the second clear I'll show is a basic Ranzal, like the original Ranzal everyone has for free, solo with him as a 4-star, using a 4-star dragon, a 4-star worm print as one of mine, and a 5-star weapon with a skill but not an elemental, so a really low power Ranzal can actually be extremely effective in this fight, just because axes are so good at hitting lots of enemies, and Ranzal actually has a passive Slayer Strength that powers him up for every 5 foes defeated. You can use passives like that on your worm prints as well. If you were playing during Fire Emblem Heroes, you might have the Heroes Arrive worm print which has Slayer Strength. That is perfect for this to put on your lead character, since every 5 enemies you defeat, you are going to get a strength power-up. And typically by the time you face the boss, you will have gotten the maximum amount of strength power-ups from this, which is 5 from that worm print, and if you're running Ranzal, 5 from his own passive ability. So you'll see in that gameplay that I get him up to 10 stacks of strength buffs, and at that point it's pretty easy for him to solo the boss. It just requires a certain amount of dodging. With respect to dodging, that's the other big tip I want to give, is try to familiarize yourself with the patterns of this fight. If you're playing and it's seeming like you're going to lose, you can always hit that button in the top right corner and hit give up. If you do that, it's not going to cost you any stamina to take part in the quest. You're actually going to get all your stamina back, and you can easily retry it. Most quests in Dragalia Lost are like that. If you fail, you get all your stamina or your wings back, you don't spend anything. But for these quests, because you get rewards based on how many waves you clear, if you let all your characters die, the quest will count as a clear and you'll spend your stamina. So if you're trying to practice and learn the patterns, make sure you're not wasting stamina doing that. You can hit that give up button and keep trying. That's what helped me to try to do these solos, is knowing where the enemies are going to spawn, knowing what type of hit patterns they throw out, and even though my play ended up being a little bit sloppy here, hopefully this gives you some confidence that if you have a full team, this should be even easier to do. Now, one of the liabilities with a full team, of course, is making sure your AI stay alive, so I'll say this as I've said in many past facility event videos. One of the tips that isn't explained well in the game is with respect to how iframes work, or invincibility frames. When you use a skill, your character has invincibility frames against red area of effect moves, but not only that, but while their portrait cut-in is on the screen, roughly for that duration, the rest of your team will also have invulnerability frames. So if there's a lot of red area of effect moves being thrown out onto the battlefield, that is a really good time to pop a skill, because not only will you be protecting yourself, but you'll also be protecting your AI teammates. Now, I don't think you need a ton of damage to get this clear once you have your facility at level 30, so I don't think that it's a big cost to run a healer on this like Lowen, but if you do feel that you're lacking damage and your units are all surviving, one of the other common strategies in facility events is don't run a healer, but use a healer as your helper. And your helper, being a Vixel or Verica, Valentine's Hildegard, someone with healing over time, like Nurse Eileen even, they can heal your team for you, and you can control when you're activating those heals, so you don't even have to run a healer on your team if you don't want to. In this case, I think it's actually fine, and I think it's actually better to use a damage-dealing helper because of how clustered some of these waves are. You'll see that wave 2, there's a lot of enemies that spawn in that top left area of water, and so you could easily use a helper to knock out all of those at once. However, I think it's actually better to save it for wave 3. Wave 3, a lot of wolves spawn in the top right, and if you're using a helper like Maribel or Wedding Elisanne, their area of effects move can just destroy all of those wolves in one shot. So those are a couple of the helpers I think are good for this, but you can try others. You can experiment a little bit and see what works. I don't think you could go wrong with either of those though, and especially Wedding Elisanne having her heal, she kind of fulfills 2 roles as a helper all at once. As far as which units to bring on your own team for this, I've already talked up Ranzal a lot as a leader. I think he's an amazing lead unit for this because of his Slayer Strength ability and worm prints that you can equip with Striker Strength or Slayer Strength to even power him up further. Other than that, I do think Bogres characters are favored here. Because the enemies spawn in those pools, it's going to be a little harder for you if you're using someone like Addis, who could still certainly be used and certainly be very good, but Addis or Melody or even our new Aoi could be problematic because they have to get close up and attack and stand in those pools and get bogged, so that might make them a bit weaker than natural Bogres characters. I will say that the basilisks in this are pretty annoying. It is good to try to clear those out as fast as possible since they deal a lot of damage and they kind of stagger you. They can easily lock you up. There are a lot of ads that appear in the final phase. It's not just the boss, there are a lot of other enemies that show up. So there is some challenge to be had here, and especially if you're bogged, it would be hard to dodge all those red area of effects moves. In this sample team, I used Pia, Musashi, Lowen, and Ranzal. Kind of just rounded out my team with co-abilities that I thought were good, like Pia's HP co-ability for survival, Musashi's co-ability for strength, and pretty much that was sufficient to be able to get the job done because my facility is already at level 30. If my facility were lower, it would definitely be a lot harder, and that's why I suggest you wait until your facility is at a higher level to take on Master, but you can start doing Expert now to accumulate points. Of course, some other characters who could be used and are at a higher rarity are Lin Yu, Maribel, Gala Ranzal. All of them are excellent characters for this, although I actually think the original Ranzal is a little better than Gala Ranzal for this. You can also use characters like Sufang or like Kuhai, who happen to have that 100% Bog Res, Eleonora or Luis, but I already mentioned that bows don't seem to be especially good for this, and I think swords could suffer from the same problem a little bit, and daggers as well, just that they're not hitting an especially wide area with their moves, and so it could be easy for them to get overwhelmed. Hopefully some of this information has helped you, and I think this is one of the more open-ended facility events we've had where there are a lot of ways and a lot of units you could use to take on this Master Difficulty Challenge battle. If nothing else, all players have Ranzal, so he is a good investment as your leader to be able to make this work. You can see in the gameplay I showed of him how he can stagger enemies with his 4 strikes, and if you're using Striker Strength on him or Slayer Strength Wormprints in addition to his own, it can easily reach a lot of strength buffs on him, and that's the reason I show him off here so much. It's just that is a budget option that will be available to everyone, especially if you happen to have a dragon like Rock who also hits in a wide area. He would be a great unit to use. Overall, this is a pretty cool facility event rerun. I'm glad it's back. One last piece of advice would be as far as wings and stamina management for this is, because this is solo only, you want to save your stamina for this as much as possible, and it's probably a good idea to start doing other content with wings, even if you normally might not have. So Master Difficulty Dragon Trials, even the boss battles that lead to extra boss battles for this, you could use wings for, just so you're saving your stamina to try to make sure your point intake or your Divine Gales intake is as high as possible. There are some other Wormprints that are currently featured in the treasure trade. Gentle Winds, Gale of Beauty, Fresh Perspective, and Garuda's Feathers. They can either give you a bump in your Divine Gales intake or your Wind Whistle Grass intake. I would suggest equipping these if you happen to have gotten them as drops, or if you were playing back when Wormprints were in the gacha pool and you happen to summon these, then it is good to equip them, but otherwise I wouldn't suggest spending Eldwater just to buy them. The Luis's hobbies that you get from that treasure trade, if you're playing proactively, will be sufficient to max out your points at 1,000,000 by the end of the event period. Anyway though, that's going to do it for this video, everyone. Let me know how it's been going for you. What are some tips that have been working well? What teams or strategies have you found to be effective in this fight? You can see I take a fair number of hits and kind of play it sloppy, but hopefully this video helped you. I hope that you're able to get your clears. It doesn't have to be now, but sometime in the event duration, it is good to try to pick up that 500 Wormite. So best of luck, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.